So the next thing that we need to do is get this grid in the proper location. So what we need to do is, again, check out our final deliverable. We can see that the grid line is opposite these other dimensions that we did, or I should say the dimensions for the grid line is opposite these others. So on the left and the top, we're going to do the grid line dimensions. And if you look, the grid line is dimensioned to the outside face of the exterior wall. So we're going to grab our dimension tool, and as before, we're going to create a dimension string that goes the whole length. Then we're going to place it. Now, if we want to move this, we don't have to move a bunch of individual dimensions. We can move them all at once. And again, if we want to change this dimension, we don't select a dimension. We select the thing that we want to change, or the thing that's driving this dimension. We've established that we don't want to move this wall, so that means we want to move this grid line. We select it, then that dimension becomes available as a temporary dimension. We hit 1 foot 8. Is that correct? Let me double check that. It is in fact 1 foot 8. Enter. That's in the right place. Now we go to B. We select column line B. We change the dimension to 24 feet. C is also 24 feet. D is 24 as well. And I believe E is 24 feet as well. They're all 24 feet. And then we come back and we're at 1 foot 8. That's exactly what we want to see. So the other thing we can start doing is we have to think about some of the things that we need to add and get these dimensions in their proper location. We can always tweak this later, but it's good to think about it early. So we know that eventually we're going to have a section mark here, so we have to have enough room for that tail in there. Plus we're going to have a footing, so we might want to stretch this out a bit. So we're going to grab our column bubble head and move this out, selecting that little circle there, that handle. And we can move this out a little bit, and we can always tweak this later. What I like to do on dimensions like this that don't fit between their dimension, the witness lines, is grab this little handle and drag the text out. It automatically puts a leader in, and then you can do that on the other side. I'm not going to go through, I'm not going to go through all of these, but that's how you move those out. Now, I am not at this point going to locate these grid lines, and I'm going to do that so that I can show you how the columns will move with the grid lines. For now, the next thing that we're going to do is create the footing. So if we go to our details here, we can see that we have a footing. We know the height now because we subtracted that from the total height. It's 1 foot 2, or 14 inches. And here it says C plan. So we're going to go back to our final deliverable, and we know that the footing in this dashed line is 3 foot typical. Now most of you know how to put these footings in. We've done it in ARC 110. So we're going to go to structure. This is a wall footing. It's a strip footing under a wall. So we're going to use that button. Now we check our type selector. The footing is 36 by 12. Well, we know ours is 36 by 14. That is not available. So when you do not have the type that you need, edit type. Now we haven't used any footings, so we don't have to duplicate this. Again, that is the best practice if you've used this and you're in an existing drawing, but we know we haven't done that, so we're just going to go ahead and rename this, and we're going to just change the 12 to 14 inches. Going to hit OK, and then we actually have to, that's just the name. We come down here to foundation thickness, and we change that to 14 inches. It automatically makes it 1 foot 2. We know that's correct, so 3 foot by 1 foot 2. OK. The rest of this we're not going to worry about. The way that we place wall foundations is we simply click on the wall that the foundation goes beneath. So we're going to click on that wall, this wall, this wall, this wall, this wall, and this wall. Now you notice that you didn't actually see anything get created. We go to the 3D, nothing's created. Okay, what did I do? I see what I did. I hit select multiple, which is not the default. So what that means is we can, using our control button, we can select multiple walls. This is much faster, and hit the finish button, and now we see the footing. Now, in the final deliverable, this one's slightly different. I don't want to see any of the hatch. We know that footings generally show up as a dashed line, and they are not hatched on the surface. So we are going to select this footing, hit escape to get out of the command, select the footing, right click, override graphics in view by category, and it will do all of our footings. And we do not want a surface pattern, and the projection lines, which we have to display, we want to be hidden. So we're going to come down here to hidden lines, and we're going to hit apply so that we can see that, and we're going to check this, and that looks about right. That's a good scale for that. We don't have to try one of the other, hidden 16th, 8th. This looks good. Hit OK, and now our footings look correct. Now we can look at our 3D view. We've got footings. I found recently what I like to do in my 3D view is change this to a consistent colors. If you haven't saved your project, go ahead and save it. Just to make the 3D view pop a little bit. And now we have our footing. Let's go back to our foundation plan. The next thing that we're going to do, let's go back to our final deliverable, is you can see that the columns come down on concrete piers that are integral to the concrete foundation wall. So they're basically a bump out. Again, we call these piers. And if you come over here to this area, column D1, you can see that we've got some typical dimensions. Those piers are 1'4" in thickness, typical. So, how do we create those? Well, this is one of those things in Revit where there is no such thing as a pier. So we have to think, what essentially is a pier? It's a column. In this case, it's a square column and it's concrete. So what we're going to do is go to Structure, Column, and we're going to look at our types. And right now we only have some wide flange shapes. So what does that mean? We have to load a column. We load family. Now, if we go to columns, that's only going to load architectural columns. We need structural columns. So we're going to go to structural columns, concrete, and at the bottom we have a square concrete column. So we're going to load that. We're going to hit open. It loads several sizes. None of these are 1'4", which is 16 by 16. So what we're going to do, edit type, and the only dimension that you have, well, first let's rename it. We haven't used it yet, so we can rename it. We'll do 16 by 16. We'll keep the naming convention the same. We'll make it look exactly like it was, so we don't get too confused, or that we're consistent. And the only dimension is, because it's square, is 1 foot. So we're going to change that to 16 inches, or 1'4". Hit OK, and now we have a 16 by 16 square column. If you remember our height, let's go back to our detail. The column pier, we don't actually have a section cut through a column pier, but you can see here in this view that the column pier is beyond. This line here is the column pier beyond. So it's adjacent to this. So we can see that the pier itself goes from the top of footing to the first floor. So let's go back to Revit. So that's the same height as our foundation wall. So we're going to plug in that 3'10" here. And now we're going to place the column. The pier, which is a column. I'm going to place it, if we look at our final deliverable, around the perimeter of the building at every column line where they join. So, A1, B1, C1, and so forth. Now, I didn't move A1 yet, or I should say 1 yet. Let's not focus on that now, but you'll see what I mean about how everything moves with the column lines later. So we'll click this, and it'll find that, it'll snap to that grid intersection. So we're going to place these, and I'm just going to do the ones along column line 1, and then E1. And now you can see that let's throw a dimension string down from the exterior wall to the column line. And again, we select column line 1. Now pay attention to the columns. We're going to change this to 1'4", or sorry, 1'8". It moves those columns, or in this case, the piers, with the column line. And that's why it's essential to get this column line drawn first, because now if we move the column line, the structure moves with it. And you can also see that because the material of this wall is concrete, and the material of this pier or this column is concrete, and they share an edge, Revit has automatically joined them. And if we go to our 3D plan, we can actually see that we have a series of concrete piers that match up with our column wall, or sorry, our foundation wall. Now the next thing that we're going to do, you'll notice that once we place these columns, you'll see, especially in the 3D view, there's no footing under these columns, or sorry, these piers. So we need to add a footing. And because this is a column, we're basically doing an isolated column footing under these piers. So let's go back to the plan. So that's on our structure tab, and we're looking at an isolated footing. So we click that. It says no structural foundations family is loaded in the project. Yes, we want to load one. So we're going to go back up, structural columns, and we're going to come down here to structural foundations. And what we want is a footing rectangular. Now, we also later in this assignment want a pile cap with 4 piles. So we're going to hold control and select both of those. And we're going to load these both at the same time to save ourselves some time. Footing rectangular comes in. Now we have to look at our plan here. Our footings, at least the ones under the piers, are 5 feet wide by 5 feet 2. So we'll notice that our type is not correct. What we need is a 5 foot by 5 foot 2 by 14 inch, right? Because our footing is 1 foot 2 thick or deep. So again, we're going to edit type. We haven't used this one yet, so again, we're just going to rename this one. We're going to call it, we're going to keep it in inches though. We're going to be consistent with the Revit out of the box naming conventions. So this is going to be 60 in the X dimension, 62 in the Y dimension, and 14 in the Z dimension. So again, you want to be consistent about X, Y, and Z as well. And we're going to change foundation thickness here to be 1 foot 2. The width is 5 feet, and the length is 5 feet 2. Hit OK. And just to double check this, we're going to place one, then we can dimension this, make sure that we got our dimensions correct. That one's 5 foot 2, so that's what I want. I'll go ahead and delete that. Now we can do an isolated footing, and just as before, we're going to click on that grid line. And it says an attached structural foundation will be moved to the bottom of the column. That's fine. What that's saying is it's moving that structural foundation to the bottom of this pier. So I'm going to place those two, go to a 3D view. And you can see that that footing is now integral to that wall. Now it's not exactly joining that wall yet. Every now and then you'll get something like this where they don't join. If you go to the Modify tab, Join on the Geometry panel, you click here and here, it joins them, and it'll do that in 3D view as well.